to start, a lot of been talked about, is it a failed season, is it a success? Where do you see this season?
Disappointing because spoke about it after the game. I'm in this to win championships, so we failed in that department. Now, did we do some good things? I think this will be the first time in 3 years there'll be some consistency within the club, so we can certainly move forward and have a good direction of where we're going.
You made some brave moves. Did you think they worked? And if not, are they going to affect the club in terms of recruitment and keeping players, etc.?
Yeah, look, my evaluation is I thought that was successful moves. I get judged on winning and losing, and our record since making those moves went in a better direction.
Could I ask, what's your relationship with Todd Blanchfield? He didn't get a lot of court time.
Yeah.
Is there a concern there? He's got a 2-year contract.
No concern. I feel like my relationship and rapport with players, there's a difference between off the court and on the court, and if those things get muddled, then you have an issue. But as far as a personal relationship, like his work ethic, his dedication to his craft did not change. If anything, enhanced in those times, which is a great quality.
So will he stay at the club? I know he's got a contract, but he's an experienced campaigner.
Yeah.
He's on pretty decent money. He's got a 2-year contract. Do you think he'll stay at the club?
As far as I'm concerned, yes. Danny and I start to look at the roster and that, but when you're under contract, the question you're asking, why wouldn't he be at the club?
Well, because he hasn't played many minutes. He had a lot of DNPs, probably from his perspective. Are you thinking that you might have to sit down with him, or he asked to sit down with him and chat about what his future is?
So, our process is we will sit down with every player, and the criteria will be exactly the same for every player. So we build some consistency about how we move forward, and obviously, if any player has concerns, we'll address those at the appropriate time.
So with Dan, I've got you as having Bryce, Mitch, Todd, and Cole's journey because the only 4 well locked, and then you've got both Websters with mutual options. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, how do you go about building the squad from here? Do you need to know from Ty and Corey quick?
As John said, our process from now out is we do exit interviews with every player, and that's consistent. We did the same thing last year, and we'll start those early next week with the players. We're going to give them a little bit of breathing room. I think the results of the season and Sunday probably a little bit raw, so we want to give guys some breathing room and us to actually get our minds together as well on how we want to approach those. And then part of those discussions with some of those guys that have options are, let's look to the future. What does it look like for both sides? And then it's getting with their agents and trying to see if there is a possibility for them to come back.
How important is it to get those two, given what you saw, how it worked well when they were both on the court, but you have to be happy and they have to be happy now. So it's almost like there isn't a contract, but it's got a conversation.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think, and John spoke to it, I think the addition of Ty really gave us a spark plug, and we loved what he did. It was unfortunate, the hamstring injury, and I think that affected us in the last game. But for sure, Corey was fantastic all season. I think we'd all agree with that. And then Ty, obviously as a local player and the talent he is, he's someone we're very interested in bringing back.
So where's Luke Travers at from a conversational point of view with the US?
Yeah, so we've been talking with Luke and his agency throughout the whole season. He's obviously coming out of contract. We want him back. Luke knows that. Luke wants to be back, and we're working now to get a deal done. With the NBA, obviously his rights are held by Cleveland. They've showed a lot of interest in him, and then that's up to Cleveland and their staff to really talk with him and his agent about what the next steps are. But from our mindset, Luke's going to be a Perth Wildcat next year if we can get a deal done.
So it's a matter of if he's not playing NBA, he's playing here. Is that the way this is the conversation?
100%. Yep.
So the key other one is Jesse at 37 and having to make a decision about whether he feels old or whether he feels young.
And last year too, when it gets to that sort of decision for someone like Jesse, who's had an unbelievable career, give him some time. He's got to think about it. It's a massive decision for him. And then for John and I and for Jesse to all sit down and kind of get around what it looks like if he wants to come back, and if he doesn't, then what that looks like as well. So that's a discussion we'll have next week.
He seems to be, Jesse, the perfect role player no matter what age he is. Is that how you consider him, and does that mean that potentially he could go another year?
Yeah, and I'll let John answer it as well, but in my opinion, yeah, Jesse's unbelievable. On and off the court, professional, experienced, captain of the club, guy would love to have around. Like, you don't want to lose that. You lose that, you're trying to fill those shoes. It's not easy to fill. You're filling it probably with a younger player. And so from our standpoint, we want to sit with Jesse and get his whole picture view on it and see if it would work for both sides.
You look at
John, Jesse, how do you see his future? You've now spent the year with him.
Yeah, I commented pretty early on in my stage here with Perth that like he's a security blanket for me for what he brings on the court, but then also off, and his care factor for this club. So to have him back, would be good if that's what he would like to do. But what I would say is in our front court, we certainly need to bring some youth and enthusiasm to our front court. And I look at Jesse would be a great mentor and someone that could really help some younger personnel through that stage of their career as well.
I think in one of Craig's podcasts earlier in this year, Cole Bowen was mentioned. Is he one player, because he's a West Aussie, he's sort of a bit of a guy that's been around? Is he one player that you'll get in touch with or have been in touch with?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in touch. There's a lot of kids in college that obviously we look at closely. John's been in the collegiate system for a long time as well and has recruited a lot of those guys. So that's been a constant over the last 19 months I've been here, is keeping track of those guys, because that's how you build your roster, through the locals. And so, yeah, for guys like Kyle and obviously Alex Dukas, they're two WA kids, and those are for sure discussions that are coming up.
You don't have a lot of space when we talk about all those other names. So we've got 4 who are locked in, plus you want the 2 Websters, and you want Luke Travers, and Jesse might go on, which doesn't give you many options when you've got the 2 imports there as well. Given that you finished 5th last year, 5th this year, do you feel like you've got enough avenues to improve the roster with the number of locals who appear like the rest of them?
Yeah, I do. And again, that's something that John and I are sitting down with now, and we're going through who's coming back, the options we have that we'd like to pick up, and then the talent that's out there, and how do we improve the roster, both by getting a little bit younger, more athletic, and then also, looking at what imports you bring in. But again, as John and I have said, I think first and foremost, it's getting the guys back on contract that we have, picking up options, and then looking at the local talent that's out there first, and then going from there.
You copped a lot for the poor defence during the year, and I know you adapted your game style because you probably were limited there. Do you have to focus on getting players that can play defence to be stronger in that position, or will you continue with the all-out attack?
This is the beauty of this time of the year, is we all can, throw out our own philosophies, what went good, when we get our roster together, that's when we can figure out. Now, would you say we need to address defense? Absolutely. I think by adding youth, athleticism, maybe a defensive-minded person or two certainly helps that. But I'm not an analytics guy, but I would say our offense was pretty good when we got in the out of first gear. So we got to look at what's best for our current personnel. You talk about Mitch Norton, you talk about the Websters, Luke Travers, they need space to operate. So if we go and get someone that is just confined to playing very close to the basket, then all of a sudden the spacing isn't quite up to the speed of what our team needs. So do we need to address that? Absolutely. But there's also limited personnel out there as well.
Can I throw a name at you? Nick Kay. Will you chase Nick Kay?
That's a name, 100%. If Nick wants to come back and be Perth Locker, but.
Would you put in a phone call to him?
I would say there's been a lot of discussions in terms of reaching out to representation, but he's in Japan, he's under contract, and he makes a very good salary over there. So, but all of those top level Australian talent, John's talked about it. We have to get the top level Australian talent back to Perth, and then build the roster out from there.
Is that the type of talent, though, that maybe you were lacking this year? And Nick Kay, who could potentially be the best player in the competition along with Xavier Cooks.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the guys that left the league last year too. So there were a lot of Australian local bigs that left last year and are currently playing in Asia. And Nick was before that. And I think the league in general was lacking that. And it's difficult. There's financial constraints to the NBL. We have a salary cap where most other leagues around the world don't. So these guys, if they can go make, generational wealth for their families for the next 3 or 4 years, like, you can't blame them for doing it. So that's something that we have to sit down as a club with ownership and look at our salary spend and see where we can fit in a guy like that. But if they're available and they're interested in Perth, then we're always interested.
Do you need a bigger input, from a centre perspective? Like, you've got Big Raw and Sean this year, and a lot of these imports have been really, really big in the past couple of years. Like, you need to be taller and stronger and wider.
Yeah, the height thing's funny. I don't think that really factors into it. I know from a general fan perspective, it's always been that way, probably. But I think when John and I look at a team, like versatility, length, like someone like Tayshawn's 6'8", he's got a 7'3" wingspan, so it's he's playing bigger than his size is. But for sure, as JR pointed out, like, we weren't one of the better defensive teams. That's going to be a focus in recruiting, rebounding. But a lot of that's personnel driven. It's strategy. There's a lot of things that go into it. But in saying that, we were elite on the offensive end too. So fix that side of the ball, keep a lot of these guards and the scoring and the way that John played offensively, then we're going to be in a good spot. And I guess to that, and John addressed it, is like, this is the first off season I've been a part of, and John, in the basically 19 months, that we're going to have consistency across the coaching staff. The last 20 months, we've had 3 head coaches. We've had a big ownership change. We've had management change. It's been a lot for the club, and I think we really did finally find a foundation, a baseline during the season of off the court, where the club's going, and then slowly I think we made some progress on the court, and I felt we had some momentum, and I think we both did. It was one game, didn't get it done against Cairns, but I think going into this off season, we're going to be able to build something for next year.
You mentioned the salary cap. It was reported during the season that you were 400 over the luxury tax from last season. You got Bryce, who you signed with the hope that he'd be Australian, and now all of his wages sitting in your cap. Are you recruiting with one hand tied behind your back from a financial perspective, whilst this just continues to hang around and Bryce isn't Australian?
It's difficult, yeah, until we get that tick of approval from the Australian government, and he can become a citizen. It limits us a little bit, and that's definitely been part of the role the last 2 years. Is, can we get that done, and that bring Bryce to be a marquee player, and that obviously is an exemption on the cap, which lowers your tax and the salary spend. So for us, yeah, I mean, again, we've talked about it for 19 months. I don't think we need to keep really talking about it until it comes. We're at this point, Bryce is an American. This is what his cap spend is, and that's how we'll build the roster.
It is, I don't know how many months it is until the start of the season. Every month counts from a citizenship perspective, because it takes about 22 months from when you apply to get it done. How confident are you from when he applied to the start of next season that he will fall into that little soft, sweet spot where it'll get done? Is it possible to be able to have him Australian in time?
Oh, it's always possible, but like, we're 19 months into this thing, and I would have thought 15 months ago we might have had it. So, like, I think we're just kidding ourselves if we're going to keep guessing until we really get that final approval. I think we just got to consider Bryce as an American, and we'll keep building the roster that way.
Danny, can I ask a tough question, but you've copped a lot of criticism over the past 2 years just for recruiting. What's your response to a lot of the fans who are saying you haven't recruited well over the last 2 years?
It's fair. I mean, that's their opinion. I mean, they're a fan, they're a paying ticket holder, and they have an opinion. I know behind closed doors what we're doing internally, we believe in. Results haven't showed it. As John said, judge on wins and losses. And, we report up to a board, and, that's for them to judge us as well. But until then, I think we're building the team the right way. Perth is a historic club, most successful club in the NBL. It's a job that I think John and I both wanted because of that. There's expectations. It's a team that's relevant in its city, in the NBL, and globally. So for me, like, we'll keep evolving, we'll keep improving, we'll look at the mistakes we've made, and we'll keep improving. Like, you're never going to bat 1,000 on recruits. It just isn't going to happen. And so we'll keep evolving. Again, 2 years, 2 coaches, 2 different styles. John came in with half a team, 80% of a team built. And, it's difficult. So we've inherited a roster, we've built on it, and now this offseason we feel like we can really sit down and kind of put our stamp on it. So, yeah, in saying that, that's kind of where we're at going into year 3.
And John, did you enjoy the season now that you can sit back? And you obviously didn't enjoy the end result, but did you enjoy your first season as a senior coach?
Yeah, look, everything that comes with this, that's why I'm about it. Competitive. Addressed before our Southeast Melbourne game with our players. I talked about just the competitive nature of this. Now we go into the recruiting, which is a competitive aspect. So I enjoy the competitive side, understanding that there's wins and losses. But going back to one of your questions to Danny regarding recruiting, roster management, all that type of stuff, you need to have the best local talent. Perth got to fudge the system for quite a while. James Crawford, Australian. Ricky Grace, Australian. Scott Fisher, Australian. When you get the elite Australian talent, like Sydney Kings finished number 1 this year, you could argue that they have some of the best local talent. Their best player, MVP of the league, is a local. So when we can get the premier local talent, that's when we'll be in business. And as you can see, we're trying to address our front court, but the best Australian talent at those positions play overseas, unless your name's Xavier Cooks. You look at Melbourne United, what they lost this year in their local talent. It's hard to replace that. Perth was very fortunate for a long time to have some really good Australian talent, and that's where we need to address. And it's a tough task, but if we can address that, it'll be a great day for the Perth Wildcats.
So is it a rebuild, or do you ever rebuild in basketball? Can you afford to rebuild?
You can't really.
Perth Wildcats rebuilding. This place had burned down. Let's be honest.
Yeah. No, I'm with John. You can't. At a place like Perth, the expectations, you can't. And just from a salary construction and how the league works, there's no draft. You can't have a losing season and be like, oh, we're okay, we're going to get the top Australian talent back, or what. There's no picks. So every year you got to retool with the top locals, and then complement them with your imports.
Probably asked everyone, but you've got the 2 imports. Bryce is obviously staying. Brady's season, although the last game wasn't impressive, he finished off pretty well. Would you take him back again on what you've seen?
We have to address the local talent first, because since the league started, prove me wrong, the best teams that win have the best local talent. Right now, we need to address that. If we don't, then we will look at our imports and go, well, how can we best complement our players and our roster with that? Now, Tayshaun and Brady, you saw when our team was at their best, they were a huge part of this team. Huge part. Brady shooting. The dynamic, the atmosphere he brings about himself. It's captivating for the Red Army. Tayshaun, his versatility, the way he can make the game easier for his teammates. But as a franchise, we have to go and seek out the best local talent. Now, we may take a lot of swings and miss. And then we will reassess that situation. They were great for this team. They're great people. Low maintenance off the court. They show up to practice every day. They tick all the boxes. So that will get addressed in due time.